Thanks so much for inviting me. So I'm not going to tell a story with data. I'm going to tell a story about data, using data, and we'll see how we get on. And this is actually a presentation that I'm giving to every single person that I possibly can achieve. And you'll understand why. This is like the third time I do this. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 10-minute slot, a half-hour slot, or an hour slot. You can tell by how fast I'm talking, this is an hour slot. And the reason being is that what I really want to talk about is how you can make some real good for people across the UK in 12 digits. So Sanders already said a little bit about me. I spent my entire life in financial services. Up to a couple of years ago, I joined the government to sort out a problem. I'm talking to you today about a problem I joined to sort out because I'm fed up having to solve it. My entire working life, I've been trying to solve this problem. It's not even something important like first life theory. It's like really basic that I've been trying to solve. So today, I'm going to tell you how I solved it. And half of you will go, well, we already knew that. You told us nothing. And you've waited now for like, I'm sorry, there is free code about it. And the other half of you will go, oh my goodness, I didn't know that existed. You have revolutionised my life. And unfortunately, I'm only talking about half. So there you go. So case of that. So when you know what I'm talking about, and when you know what the answer is, feel free to have cakes, get your coffee, enjoy those online, and please feel free to stop and go and walk your dog or something. So it all starts from what are you trying to achieve with this? And it always starts with customer outcomes or customer needs or what we do with your customers in your employee. Fundamentally, who are you behind whatever it is you're trying to do? And the first question I tend to ask is, well, who is the customer? Who are we talking to? Who are we interacting with digitally or face to face? How do you know? I also have a mental game with myself. When I start a new job, I wait to see who actually asks if I am the person who applied and how do you know. Because if you start a job and you turn up on the right day and you say, I'm here, you say, who's going to check? And I always find it quite interesting. If I wanted to be a spy, that's exactly what I'll do. I just turn up one day and I'm starting work today. And as long as you speak confidently and know roughly what you're talking about, I'm fairly sure you could start at any organisation. And it's that James Bond thing. So back to that. So it starts with, when you're talking about customer data, it starts with collecting some data and we use it to identify. And then we give them another identifier. And then having given them another identifier, we use that in the process of. And that's just a general thing, no matter whether it's banking, HMRC, DEFRA, hospital, doesn't matter. This is a general thing. You go in and you get given an identifier. To the point that you have loads and loads of those. Now, interestingly, the government recently announced, after I've written the presentation, that they're going to sponsor a digital wallet. The idea being you can keep all of your identifiers in one place. That's great. I'm not quite sure how it's going to know what my bank account details are. You know. And I'm not sure if I know the customer number of my local library, but maybe it will. But the point is we are known by loads and loads of those things. But actually, in most conversations about people or organisations, it's sometimes really simple stuff. What's your name? What's your address? What's your date of birth? In the UK, that's good enough to identify you. Almost always. There are a couple of well-known exceptions. There are some twin brothers who were given the same first name, who happen to live in the same house. They were born on the same day. Actually share a lot of DNA as well. So they are really, really difficult for organisations to use systems to come apart. Luckily, there aren't very many that sort of outline. Generally speaking, this is the way we know each other. But today I'm going to talk about the address. This is the problem that has plagued me for years in the UK. It's so simple. This is the official of the internet, so must be real. What you're supposed to put on a letter to address it. It is so simple in the UK. The name, the house number or name, the town, postcode, maybe a locality. I'll give you a few examples just to help that. It goes back to very, very long time ago. We've been writing letters. And with the HMRC, we write to you as well. And we're quite keen on that. But when I was growing up, we used to have postcards. We had letters from one friend. I wrote letters to my family. And the address is the only way of getting there. The rules on address are ridiculously simple. And yet, here are some real addresses. Now, when I was putting this presentation together, I actually went past the HMRC and Collins team, the GDPR, you're not allowed to share those real addresses. And I explained to them that an address is not a real person. It's an address, GDPR doesn't apply. If I told you who lived there, then I would be declaring that individual's personal data, and I'm not telling you who lives there. Then it's fine. Okay? Now, just, if you want to rob me, these are my past addresses. At some point in my life. And the reason I use them is because I think this is a problem that has plagued people using. So the top one, used to live there. I was house number 9, and got a postcode. We're in great. Next one down, house number and street numbers. No, hasn't got one of those. Just doesn't have a house number. Got a house name. The street name is going to write on the next line. Okay? Well, we're breaking the rules a little bit. So maybe it's house number or name, street name. And then it's got a locality in a town. That's messing with them.
Sorry.
So an address, even though it's an incredibly simple thing, can be quite complicated. For the next few moments, I'm going to ask you to consider the tanning shop. The tanning shop is free. That is the photo that you get to Google. And for the next few moments, we're just going to talk about this building here. Really complicated building. In that building, there is an address where Miss Robbie lives. That's ground floor 1, 43A Catherine Street. If you're in Fruit, by the way, Catherine Street, beautiful street. You come there first Sunday of the month, marvellous market, amazing place. But just coming back to the address for a moment. Ground floor flat 43A. Well, it's not a house number, or is it? I don't know. I haven't got a locality in left Catherine Street, so I can't sound like a human being. And the poor old computer's got to turn all of the 3 addresses I've shown you so far into something that it can then compare to each other, or it can go to a person, or it can send to another computer that then has to interpret it. And the problem that I've had throughout my career, throughout my life really, is how do you write it down? How do you write it down in a computer? Do I have 4 lines of postcode? How long should those lines be? 20 characters, 10 characters, 100 characters, 200 characters fit on an envelope? And it becomes a ridiculously hard problem to get it right. What's really annoying is the ridiculously hard problem of getting it right is got rules. So how come the rules aren't making it simple? And of course, the reality of all of these different ways of travel is, well, you can ask yourself as a human being when I see that, is there a first floor flat? Is there a 43B? because I've got 43 days. There are not just the number 43. Maybe the A is not there, it's just 43 the first born grandfather. And the problem is that there is enough information for us to know that. And therefore, when we're writing our computer system to hold this data, we sort of pretend it doesn't exist and somebody will just enter it right or go back. And let's really hope that every other person makes those same decisions. Otherwise, trying to work out is planning shot there or what color. One of the most difficult things, can you get broadband? If you ask ChatGPT to write you an address processing algorithm, you get that. Now, you can ask ChatGPT that, or you can ask Google that, or you can ask any of the search engines. You get the same answer. Now, that to me says that this answer is repeated over the internet, because that's what we've done. It's sort of scraped the internet. So, they will come up with this sort of processing of how to get an address. But the long and short of it is if Virgin Media or BT or whoever it is has not got the exact way of referring to your address that you have when you're speaking to it, saying, please can I have broadband? There is nowhere for the engineer to turn up. And if you're really lucky, they look at it and the engineer turns up. And he knocks on the panel and says, hello, Mr. Lee, I'd like to install your broadband. And they go, I have no idea who you're talking about. Or they go, I can see some other entrances. Maybe I'll go to another entrance or maybe let's move to the next point. The reality, the impact on people of not having the right address is a lot more than you may think. This is a problem we're trying to solve. Now, I have to say I don't help ourselves. That building I've shown you, those are all of the official addresses for that building. Ridiculous. These are the official addresses from the land registry. So what? 7 different addresses. Pretty neat. Right? Clearly, even the official land registry says this is where addresses are. This is the register of ownership and such like. So the garden apartment 43A. Land at the back of 43, which isn't the same as 43A. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But just an address is funny. Now, when I was putting this together, it was the reality of getting broadband that led me down this path to then say, how hard can it be? If I was down class, how hard can it be to get an address? And I quite search. I worked for the government, I didn't go to the tax record, you can't do that in HMRC, despite everything like that. So, the answer to this problem, and if you know what the answer is, and this is the point at which you're going to go, right, okay, boring, I'm going to go to the back, I'm going to have a copy, because the answer to all of is the unique competency reference. Comes up all those the unique property reference. That's the whole when you do that. Everybody else, I'm talking to you, those of you know what it is, all I'm going to do is bang on about that first. So it's not interesting. You might learn something about how it comes in, seeing how it works, things like that. And that's why it's a big miracle, it's got one, you 12 digits. There's a unique property reference on 12 digits. It's a unique numeric identifier for every property in the UK. Every property in the UK. Quite excellent. So, if we take 3 addresses we've seen so far, each of them has a unique property reference. So, that's simple, isn't it? We find another one, they're up to 12 digits long. Simple. I can just pass it together. And when I was talking about this, friends, we're talking about this stuff. And then, so we've got to all learn our 12-digit reference number. We've got to tell everybody that by learning our national insurance number. How many of you don't know your national insurance number, by the way? Please download the HMRC app. top of the HMRC app, you can get it to tell you your national insurance number. And while you're there, tell you all your stuff like that's there. That's those who haven't downloaded the HMRC app. Okay. I work for HMRC. I promise you, it is the easiest way of solving your tax issues. It is far simpler than phoning up. You'll see all the press about long queues at HMRC. Download the app, don't be one of the things. Anyway, deal with it, by the way, anyway. Do you know what most the call that HMRC get the most is? Minutes, 30 minutes. Hello, my name's Robert Lee. I don't know my national insurance number. Can you tell it to me, please? Yes, certainly, Mr. Lee. Let's take you through the queue. Most calls to HMRC are asking that question. So please find it out, download the app, do yourself further. Right. I used to work in banking and I had a different story because I was different for my bank. So we've got the UPR, unique property reference number. And when we say property, it's a bit of a generic term. Then you take it to the house. Every dwelling, every place that a person lives has its own UPR. And the building does itself. And basically, whenever you need to identify something, the chances are there's a UPR fault. So if you need the one for the building, for the supply, for example, electricity, then there's only one electricity supply, or you need the one for the 4 apartments. When I was a child, we called flats, apartment plans, so it's up, very up on. You get different UPRs. And of course, different UPRs, they're just 12-digit numbers. But the problem is true. Even though I'm not reading it in a way that makes it easy to read, you can tell they're not the same. I can immediately know these 2 addresses are not the same address. The other things that have UPR are these points of things. So bus shelters, post boxes, the money of transport has UPR. And it's different from the what 3 words, which isolate a sort of 3-metre Qualcomm financial grant. Because it's a thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's this bit of the maze or that bit of the maze, it's still the maze, and so the UPR is work. I always wondered about some of the longer bus shelters when you've got longer than 3 metres long. Does it have 2 what 3 words, depending on how long the queue is? Anyway, I don't have one UPR. So it's a number that is like really helpful because we can identify things as well as where people live. And of course, most people are going to go, what's that? Yeah. So I used to live in a house, and the house got increased. So what happens to the UPR and then stop truck? Mr. Clever Blocks. And the answer is absolutely the UPR want to allocate it on never reviewed. That's a part-time promise of how they're allocated. Which means that you can know that if it relates to a thing, it will continue to relate to the thing, or it will relate to the thing that isn't there anymore, but you know it isn't there. It doesn't relate to a new thing. That's quite handy, really, with identifiers. I think the hand numbers are really good. They are. What is the rule that says a bank account number is never reused? Nowhere. It stands at each bank to decide. UPR is a fake new, they've got rules around rules saying never ever reused. Now, luckily, banks are sensitive creatures, and so they don't tend to reuse of what people are still alive and what people might go back and look after and what they can. So there's hand back.
You said that these banking accounts are very.
I didn't say that. The set of addresses I used kind of brand registry. UPR, I'll tell you where they come from on the next slide. Have you ever heard there's good questions? Yeah, it's good stuff. And then there's a great question. That's a great question on the next slide. Fairly nailed. But before I get that, I just wanted to introduce the unique street reference number, which is just the same as a street. And one of the reasons for that is what's a street? The real world's a complex place. Sometimes street crosses physical boundary and make it crossroads. The A46 the street down in Bath and in Yorkshire. Yeah, I don't recall it being a single road. Houses at one end called one all the way down to the other end where they're about 40 days. Yeah. So the A46 doesn't really work as a street name. And it's got lots of different names all the way along. And so there is a unique street name as well. And that's a street number. So USRN is exactly the same as street. Yes.
How many people we going to have?
I don't know.
We have how many? We're not going to use these numbers.
No.
Right.
I can't do maths.
Right.
I'm not clever enough.
Right.
But it feels like quite a big number.
Yeah.
And as it's dwellings, not people, they don't come and go that fast.
On the base, is it UK based or is it global?
It's Great Britain.
It's global.
It's great.
It's global.
No, it's Great Britain.
Oh, just Great Britain.
Yeah. And the reason I said that, not UK, I know there's a difference, but I can't remember what it is.
Northern Ireland.
Thank you. So, USRN still well. So how do they come into being? I'm trying to think the local authorities were it. The local authorities have a guarantee to have a person responsible for managing the addresses in the local authority. Not only do they manage the swing points and the collection of rubbish, and that's all, they have a person whose job it is to manage addresses. And when somebody says, "I'd like to build a new house," they invite a planning commission. At that point, the UPRO is allocated. I don't tell you what it is, it's allocated behind the scene. And they tell the land registry, so I don't all the land registry and local authority work together. And then at this point, when the design is approved, the UPRO is used. And then later on, we may know there's a street to go. This can be before what street even exists. You know, when there's so where I live, there's about to be a development because all of a sudden there's lots of people get excited about something that's strange saying, yeah, the Riverside Walk. Stop Riverside Walk, keep it for people. What on earth is that? It's an estate about to be built on the site. That's the first time I ever know that. Now, at that point, there's already been planning permission sought, and so UPRN is allocated. They're not told to anybody in case the planning permission doesn't go through. It goes through, local authority allocates the street, Royal Mail later allocate the postcode, let's go to change. As they run out of where they use, they change. That's a lot of planning. Building commences, people live in it, different people live in it, but I also keep track of that because they want to send you the council tax bill. Maybe it's deleted, and then it is deleted by the houses for it off, then it is archived. There is a process by which this thing comes into being. And because the local authorities have to know what's going on in their locality, pretty robust. Now, this isn't to say it's not perfect. It is, but it's a damn sight easier than it's two chimneys with a number two, the same as two chimneys with the PWO, the house name.
Now in the UPRN doesn't tell you anything.
Correct.
You still need to know the address.
Correct.
And you've just given us an example of two different addresses
Yep.
at the same place.
Yep.
So do they both have to be associated to that UPRN? Work?
So the example I gave was there's only one address. It's just that it's described differently. And there's only one UPRN. So I'll come on a bit more about that in a minute. So John,
That's the point of this question. That's about building, what the UPRN for each flat, for the building.
so when it comes to flats, it's for each legal dwelling. So how to block occupancy where you can have three people who all share the same address. And that's nobody knows how many living there, other than the landlord, but there's no law for that. There's one. There's secret flats that you buy separately, and there's one for each flat. So it's not about the person, it's about the policy. And some of these is the policy components. My colleagues in the evaluation of the status, the online body, and then thinking of the official valuation that the government uses to work out how much it is costing, and how much, what's a good price for things. And the valuation of the status is called the hereditable. I can learn that. And a hereditable is an inheritable thing. Basically, a UPRA is something that defines a property which, if you were to die, somebody could inherit. So it's a legal property, not something you could have its own.
What happens if the legal friends gets together?
I get split up. One of them will get a new UPRA. There's now one for each. And if they join back together again, one of them added to the archive. Again, once they're created and then destroyed, they're not there anymore. In fact, as you say, you can take it away and turn it into a form, then you get extra UPRAs. Because again, the local authority has to know what's going on, because they want to make sure that they have the right number of folks collecting rubbish. It's good household in there. Probably some rubbish. There's a lot of other things you could use for, and we'll get to how in a moment. So it's used for health records, used for working out people affected by floodplains, used for working out land damage, it's used for working out its topography of the land. So the person who helped you with the presentation is from the Ordnance Survey. I only know Ordnance Survey do one thing, which is lovely maps that I use for unhiking. Brilliant. They do loads of other stuff in terms of including standards for UPRA code Ordnance Survey. And it can be mapped to all of these things because it is a thing that everyone trusts. It refers to the same object. It doesn't really matter what your industry is. It's going to be a industry. So whether you're in financial services, whether you're in transport, whether you're in land and property, whether you're in entertainment, you need to know about where things are and how to refer to them. And different industries have different uses for where things are. I'm always amazed at this last mile delivery problem and how parcels get to my house, vendors to that by, and how Amazon miraculously can make things appear there the next morning that I've ordered the night before, and I didn't back the off. I have no idea how it happened, but I am confident that they are using the UPRA because they know where my address is. Sorry, they know what my address is. And they don't need to worry about how I describe it to you because they've got the UPRA. They still need to know where physically on the planet. There's a really important thing when you're designing things or process, asking people to type in their UPRA isn't going to work for you because they won't remember it, like we don't know it anyway. If you just get them to type in their address, you then have to match that to the list of UPRAs. You make it a better one, but you're still doing the matching and trying to work out how it works, but you still want to be. The far better way is to select it from a list, pick the one you're in, and that moment, because you pick from a finite list, you can grab the UPRA. In days gone by, when I first started getting interested in addresses, by the way, if you're interested in addresses, there's a book called The Address Book, and it's the history of the address. What? So the address is the most human thing. I learned that in some parts of the world where people are displaced to, in order to give aid to, you have to know where they are. And so there's a charity set up that goes around and on perhaps slum heaps, they actually give people addresses who literally have erected their own house at wherever they can find. What a marvellous thing that it requires to be given an address that then allows them to claim benefits from their government such as anyway, address the honestly. So when you select something and you select it, you get the UPRN and you install the UPRN. And from then on, in your computer system, just use the UPRN. It's only when you need to print out a letter that you need to actually go and find out what the proper address is. 2020, the government's going to change standard on this because this is really good idea. And all governments are supposed to use the UPRN in 2020. We have 5 years since that. Today is the 3rd time I'm doing it. Why? Because nobody knows it. Yeah, so I'm on a mission to tell as many people as I can about the UPRN. Today's 3 people new. I don't know how many people are online, but now a lot more people know about it. You're all going to go, let's get off this call. You'll remember it. You'll tell your friends, and next time you're writing a computer system, you'll go the UPRN. The executive committee at HMRC know about UPRNs. Every time I'm presenting to them on anything, I say, you can all know about UPRNs. They have a problem, thank you, we remember, it's become a bit of a joke. But as the executive committee move around government, they'll take that knowledge with them. And gradually, we're telling people about this. Because mandating it as a standard hasn't worked. We'll all be familiar with the cartoon about asking about standards you don't like or you think are not like. So having it as a standard doesn't help. You have to tell people about it. The other thing we're doing is we're adding it to the APIs. So HMRC has lots of APIs that people use to tell us about their tax business. And in the case of employers, every month they tell us who's employed by them and how much tax they're putting on the payroll. Yeah, great thing. That's why in the UK we have one of the lowest impacts on the population tax. The amount of effort that we in the UK put into paying our personal tax is compared to any other country. All because of PAYE. Marcus thing. Anyway, PAYE comes in every month. We use that. We're going to be adding the UPRN as well as the address to the APIs. Because it makes it easier for us. It makes it easier for the people telling us. It's just about making it easier for them. First example, so Nottingham Council used the UPRN to work out how properties were moving or were they rented out. And they could then compare that with their licenses. Saying, are people licensed to rent a property out? In other words, maybe they've got a property they're renting out, haven't told anybody, and that's bad thing. And they spend a lot of time finding these data sets together to try and work things out. And if you add in the UPRN to each of the data sets, they don't have to worry about the format of the address. Just do the lookup once. £125,000. And every time a public body saves money, that's like having a tax plan. Now, granted, 125,000 in Nottingham doesn't mean it's up to your pocket, even if you're living there. But it means that they can spend it on something else. Equally, London Borough of Hackney used it, or working out how to give aid to residents in need, and pull together different data sets based on the phrase. Later on, you ask, how do you do it? And it's really simple. Whenever you have a data set which is related to an address, you replace or add the UPRN address and you use that to join it. Most of the data set is actually where it manages it. This is just a really simple index, which is why this is like 40-minute talk to take it out of index. Like, it's a very boring talk. Which was quite like interesting. It's not make it really unbelievable. Having the UPRN where you've got address, use it whenever you're preparing. That's it. We've already had the savings, and Organ Survey, when they were putting this together, reckoned that it's about £250 million has been saved already up to 2022. Which when they put the slides together was recently, but now it's 3 years ago, what's bigger now, and I can't work out what I'm not that put up there. There are 42.8 million UPRNs used today. And I was thinking, that's not. That's impossible. That's like nearly one per person. And then I remembered that, of course, post boxes, they all have them. And even though many people live with more than one person in a dwelling, with all those other things, I can now understand why they're so many. So if you can use, should they useful? Next question, when you get that problem. The Ordnance Survey has a thing called address-based premium. And on address-based premium, you can find the UPRA. Ordnance Survey create that, they manage it. There's also a load of third-party organisations that use exactly the same data set that you can buy it from. Unfortunately, you have to buy it. It's not free. Imagine how much better your customers, your employees, much happier they're going to be if you get addresses right. Guess what? And so their broadband actually gets installed when they run up. Their passwords get it. You don't get asked for somebody else's debt because they got the address wrong. It doesn't help you if somebody gives you the wrong address. It doesn't stop it being false. And it means that when you're comparing addresses, you can get these things. It's just better. I just love this. It's such a simple thing. And yet, there's just, I just think there's like 12 steps down. And it's all through the economy. The 12th one is obviously the most important, which is you need to tell everybody about. Question back.
Let's suppose you live on an hour. It's the more the boat is not using our own.
Fine. No, I know. I imagine that it's mooring because it's a property reference number, not a boat reference number. And local authorities, they're pretty good at tracking where you are each day. I'm not sure where it's there, but moorings will have it. Provided, and I imagine it's permanent mooring, you have permanent.
Yeah.
I want to like know that. I know it's
Actually, one of my questions is really who developed this, that you confirmed it's been on the survey. Have they completed it? Obviously, the new buildings, new streets, etc., the block processes in place and that's tracked. But there's that backlog. Yes, that backlog being done, and we not reinvent the same issue with the addresses. Because you have to have that one knowledge, wouldn't it? You have either walking around the streets, saying that's that one, that's this one, etc., etc.
So that has happened.
And that's been completed.
Yes. Does that mean it's 100% correct? No.
No, yeah.
But so I spoke to people who do it. I said, so if I've got a UPRN, can I rely on it? Yes, I say 100%. And if I haven't got a UPRN, and I go, yeah, but you haven't got one hack, so you know where it's off. The whole spike backlog.
If you look into the informal addresses, I'm just thinking, the example of 7 addresses to reply.
Yep.
The government government, I'm guessing, is really deciding to call the chemical one. One of the one they do, there's more ones, and so when it gets recorded in the system, I have to go on my house.
Yeah. That's done between the land registry and the local authority. The local authority that actually say this is a dwelling. The land registry says here's a piece of land with a red line around it that we call X.
But if I just change the name of my house, and so on my friends.
Yep.
How does that get into it? Is it gets to the local authority? Yes. So is it, this is an address we haven't got.
Okay. So telling your friends you've changed the name of your house is a bit like does treacles and forests make that? It's like, well, have you changed the name of it, or have you just told your friends you want to be something else? So a friend of mine has changed his name. He used to be called John, now he's called John Spastic. And I said, is it hyphenated? He said, it's John Spastic. I said, but is it John Hyperslash or John Space? He said, it's John Space. I don't know whether he's hyphenated or put a space there. I don't know if he's told anybody official that that's his name. And in many ways, it doesn't matter, provided he knows and he's consistent when he deals with official. And this is almost about how can you fix human beings completely by storing their data better? The answer is no. And can we store it in a consistent way, such that when computers talk to each other, businesses talk to each other, we mean the same thing? Yes.
What about hash purity location?
Yes.
Is it even?
I don't know. They do have them because they exist. We spend a great deal of time in the government worrying about secure things. So I'm absolutely certain that they have one. But whether you can look it up, I don't know. It's like if you ever use Google Maps, you look down from above, and it's like green fields, roads, green fields, what's there? And all the local people go, well, that's where there's this, whatever it is there. And there's a label studying that something is there, but if you're local, you know. And I imagine it's the same with UPRN. If you're able to know it's there, then there is UPRN. If you're not able to know it's there, then you probably imagine like that. What question?
So that point of view is the hardware history is actually operated. I think there's still process around the formula of the history, but I don't know whether you have to be like the phone or whether the whatever. Even though the papers now in the study usually project, if we say it's the longer history, it must be not making sense. So
It does.
here's what we say. It's not the realization on the people of those days.
Yeah.
And it's not people going to be concept of the plots. Well, there will be some other plots that then will have a history that actually be concept.
Well, language gets involved when they're stopped, but not the fact they exist.
Well,
And that's the processes as to when they get involved.
but if you get involved when it's the
But I'm not sure they do. Only because nobody checks till they train out.
it's the basically the money in this meeting for the still will probably run something about the vision of bank on the own day. You still
Yes.
everything that goes with the
This doesn't solve those problems, but it does mean that everybody's referring to the same address. So all of the problems of legality, things like that, are not solved. However, it is an easy method to know it exists. So if there is land that isn't registered, does this solve it? No. When it's registered, can we refer to it by the same name? Yes. And it's that way of thinking. So I mentioned VLA before. The VLA, until UPRN came on, because they've been around for a while, had their own reference number for property. And they've now adopted the UPRN as their own internal reference number, which is great. Right.
How widely adopted is the APIs now across?
I would say about 10 times more than an hour ago. Yeah, because there's about 10 times as many people know about it now.
And what about this?
For the government one, there's one on HMRC. One. And that isn't even released yet. Because it's not going through the process. We said, why have you got UPRN? What's UPRN? So if you can understand this is why people don't know about it. So it's not widely adopted. Yet.
You mentioned that the local authorities, the ones that are making their rights.
Yes. Yeah.
So they constitute their own independent states. Specific ones.
I don't know. We can have debate. I'd love to do a perspective about data owners. Only because I've picked data for a long, long time and I know I'm a heretic. So despite being a Christian and happy lens to those views Christian, because it overlaps with all the other religions at the moment, anyway, modern time. So be happy to talk to you about data ownership because I don't think data ownership fixes anything. I just think it gives you a really good handle to have a conversation. It doesn't fix it. As was proven recently, where data owner said, no, I don't want to call it given name, I want to call it surname. And we went, but it's given name everywhere in all of our systems. And I went, I don't care. I'm the data owner, I want it to be called surname. Now, at that point, you then have to ask yourself a really existential question, which is, does the data owner have the right to change the name of the data entity? I'll leave that for you to discuss. Thank you. Hold on. One more slide. Okay? Because if I didn't have a file with AI, that's not right. But you have to have something AI. AI is, it doesn't help. Help this problem. In fact, without having UPRX to actually agree that this is the UPRX, and AI makes it up. So this is actually a really good thing. I mentioned before I asked all the AIs. So I have a solution. Anyway. And they all gave me the same picture. And I tried to work out what the code was that was in the picture. I couldn't. Because most AIs are really bad at generating text inside pictures. And anyway, anyway, so AI needs UPRX, not the other way around. Thank you. That's my storytelling about data, using data. And you can judge yourselves whether that was a good story or a bad story, and whether you liked the narrative or not, or whether there was enough data in it, or whether the point of the story, which is all of you will go home remembering UPRX, tell your friends, which was the purpose of this, have been met or not. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. It's really so mind-bending concept, and we just know we live in address, personal name, date of birth, and address. It's very common question. If any call center asks you, but it's just behind the manager, testing address. So really insightful and so thank you once again. So with that, if we may move on to our speaker for the day, let me quickly introduce. This page is engaged with another government department, building digital intake, and from the concept already we heard from Rob, broadband. So he is associated with some of those works. He is an AI researcher and data scientist, and we'd like to hear from him possibly the internet in the we'd like to hear from the visualization, which is another facet of how data is the what it is, how we make use of it. So it's your space. Approximately I need yes, yes.
Relog in, yeah. Shall I log up? Shall I log up? Yeah. It sounds like it's coming from the microphone is coming from. You should come from a speaking system, but you should catch up with them. Yes, I think so. The light comes like, as soon as you get closer, the sound gets like, yeah. So don't think it's like this. There's a lot of experiences. You don't want to. So you're so you can have some, yes. And is it on the happiness coming from that? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, so what is the name of this one?
Great example. Library working doesn't work. The office works. Remote works.
Everything sits right by the main channel.
Currently mine has to get down to 30. I don't know why. Yeah, yeah, probably true. So, right, okay. So my name is Chris Page. I work for BBK, build so to speak, agency responsible for taking broadband various basically free. So essentially, you have broadband will go a certain distance, and after that, it becomes commercial. So essentially, you have to set up an organisation to look at how to identify what is not commercial, and then contract program which effectively identifies or gets asked the suppliers to identify the funding gap, why it's not commercial, give us a complete financial model that backs that up, and then how much money they're asking for so that they could actually do it. So typically, say you've got a village somewhere, say 500 houses, that sounds feasible, but the nearest fibre is 20 kilometres away. Then it's not realistic to expect to share the cost of that 20 kilometres to those houses. So that's basically what we do. I've done this in this very strange way, simply because I think that we want to make it more interactive, and you can ask questions like go and find particular slides. So essentially, it's a very successful program that started in 2011 when we were doing Superfast. That was one of the most successful projects. We were early, but a lot of stuff late. And so there's still some places, even in London, that don't have 30 minutes. So why is it so hard? That's one of the things. But in terms of gigabit, when we started, it was 6%. We're at that phase in the contract where we're miles ahead. So 12 months ahead of where we're supposed to be, we actually hit 85% of our first target. Now we've got to go to as far as possible. And essentially, that is going to be 30. Obviously, when we start at 6%, commercial hadn't before. I worked for Warwickshire County Council. I still work for Warwickshire County Council. I'm in and I started doing supervisors. One of the things that I found out how to do is to work out which bits were commercial. And so that's why I was asked to look at how we could do that when we were so like I said. Painted by the third speaker. Before this special watch. You'd be surprised to see. Used to work. And then the whole purpose of this is to empower us to make insightful judgments like the one I described. Okay, so here's a beautiful picture. It's a kingfisher. No? Probably detect the theme here with my tie as well. Yes, I'm a bird watcher. Now, if you compare that picture, which is beautiful, painted by three, then why is this different? Artist achieved that painting. So like a snapshot image, let's say you put a graph on the screen, it has a certain amount of use, but it's nowhere near as informative as something like this. So you can see if you're interested in, like I'm interested in, how does he get the water to look so realistic? How can you see how he does the reflections? So if we move from a static image to potentially a moving image to illustrate things, then we can go further than that and make it interactive so that you can move backwards and forwards and pause and look at the things that interest you. And sure enough, there it is in the finished form. So when we're thinking about visualization, we're thinking about how to represent it, the tools that we use, and how interactive they are. Now, I can find. I expect you've seen this, which is an amazing piece of work done by someone who's passed away now, but his family keep it going. And this is something which is just a video, like we had with the video of the kingfisher being painted. It's a lot more informative, and you can understand probably better if you looked at the website, which is Gapminder,
to see what the different elements are. So you've got the size of the bubble, and you've got its position on the axis. So this particular one is showing the life expectancy against the GDP. And you've got some interface elements that you can control. If you've not played with it, I recommend you do. And Rosling, who did this, was a professor who was responsible for helping people understand data about population dynamics. And so he asked his first class of students to say, right, here's a set of questions which you can find on the website. And what it showed was that there was significant ignorance about how much further developed countries in the South and what we call developing countries had moved on compared to what their expectations were. And interestingly, he performed the same experiment with, well, his son, sorry, performed the same experiment with the artificial intelligence. There, I've mentioned it. Different language models, and they are far less biased than any human being that they've ever come across. Okay, apart from probably Hans and his family, who obviously work with the data closely. Oops. I've gone to sleep as well. Was that read before?
No.
Plug it again.
Yes, I can do that. It's good. See, I'm trying to stop it happening again. Really. Put this in just to stop it.
You know, when we normally use your IT person. But now we get to see how many IT people just pay. Turn on the TV.
Yeah, what's the wrong vote?
Yes. And more display issues. I used to be an IT technician, you wouldn't know, would you? So we thought about how we might visualize some information. So let's think of it in terms of the percentage that's under 30 megabits a second. Here we've got 3 ways of looking at that. And anyone care to work out what the difference is between 1, 2, and 3? So these are census areas where 3 is giving you the MSOA, which is the biggest, about 5,000. 2 gives you the LSOA, about 1,500. And 1 gives you the output areas themselves. So the other 2 are just aggregations of output areas. So what does it say? Well, it says that if you look at MSOA level, there's no problem, basically. It's a bit like saying, oh, 2% of London hasn't got broadband. How many people is that? That's a lot of people. Okay, that's actually second only to Scotland in terms of the number of people who can complain about their broadband, which is the way I look at it. Okay. So the size that we use is important. So why do we use output areas? Well, they're designed for statistics. They have the same number of premises. So therefore the shading is representing something sensible. That's why they do it. And what we can see is that, you know, it's people related. So when we come down to houses, then essentially we're down to only 40 when you go to the minimum. Scotland likes to do it differently, so it's 20. We won't comment on that. And so we can then use that colouring, that shading, to show us using, this is old information, obviously, to look at which type of areas are being missed, because you'll notice that the shapes are all hugely different sizes. Well, of course, because if it's a dense area like in a city, then it's going to be a small, you know, to get 40 houses. Obviously, when you've got some huge space, that means it must be sparse. But it's not very good. So one of the problems with these is that the people who lovingly generate these from the census information and draw the lines around them, they are in Southampton, and that team is a brilliant team, but they like to draw lines down the middle of a road. So if I'm going to give this contract to a broadband company and say you must not do people that side of the road because that's a different contract, that's obviously a bad idea. So it's a good start, but it's not very effective for job that we want to use it for. But we can get some useful information about it. So here we're using the area as a way of saying, well, these ones here are the smaller ones. The other way around, is it? Yeah, these ones are the larger ones. And these are the smaller ones. So we're pulling stuff from one window to another, and we're experimenting with the split to try and understand whether one area of the country is the same as another area of the country, because the team that I work in BID UK at this stage is called the place-based strategy, and the idea really is that they're very different. You know, a solution that's going to work in Norfolk is not necessarily going to work in the centre of Cambridge. So yes, we can illustrate something with it, but we can use roads more easily. So here I've got shading behind, but you can see it's nowhere near the whole story, because, you know, there's loads of stuff here in Cumbria where actually most of the output area is mountain, because they have to join with the one the other side. So they extend out the mountain. So that's not very good, because when it gives us the density there, it's got all this mounting, which is obviously not very helpful. So early on, this is, you know, what data is useful. Well, early on, we found that actually drawing the roads and using the roads gives us a lot more information. For instance, if we just had points on the map, then we don't know whether there's a river between this point and that point, or whether there's a route between them, if there's, you know, how far you have to go to join these two together. Where obviously we're trying to connect people with fibre, so we do need to know that kind of information. So we're using colour vision deficiency colouring, and so that's what it means. So dark blue means that, yes, they have gigabit now. The light blue is what we think is possible. How do we think it's possible? Well, we've used data. What data did we use? Well, actually, if you can extract from BT the speed that everybody has under their old superfast or ADSL even system, then essentially we know how long the copper is. So whatever route it goes, because the problem with the telecom system is essentially that you have this road, it's got a, you know, an old house on it. So in the 1800s, whatever, they wanted a telephone, do that from 5 kilometers away, which is where the nearest exchange is. No problem, voice. Okay. And then there's a few more outbuildings they convert into houses, and then you have a few more connected to the exchange. And then they sell off some land. So then you have an estate built, and they put a cabinet in the estate, take a big cable to the cabinet, and then they split out the cabinet. Now, when you do the first type of broadband, you do part of the fibre, part of the route is converted to fibre, and it's from the exchange to the cabinet. So suddenly that cabinet gets fibre, but these poor people in these big houses, they don't get it at all. So they've got nothing, and they're the ones that will complain, obviously. I'm always thinking about, you know, who we're serving. It's about people. So this is telling me that I've got a problem there, because the influential people, who are likely to be the ones that are effective at complaining, don't get anything. Right. So essentially then, you end up with a mishmash. But the mishmash is on roads. Now, when you get to fibre, you don't want to know that 3 of the people on the road don't have fibre, because it can't be worth spending taxpayers' money connecting somebody when their next door neighbour's got it already, can it? So we developed some algorithms that filtered out these premises that were obviously commercially viable. I mean, if your next door neighbour's got it, it's going to be commercially viable, isn't it? Okay, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of premises that you've just dropped off the target that we have to reach. Now, how we get them to do it is a different matter, of course. But essentially, by using a road analysis, and we're all for UPRNs, but by using a road analysis, then we're focused on the network build, which is our particular thing. It eliminates the noise, because we don't care whether this bit of road is, you know, fed by 3 different cabinets. We only need one connection to get the fibre there. And we can also work out how long it is for each of the premises associated with that road through the address-based data set that was being referred to earlier. Then essentially we can see how difficult those are to connect, because they're too far away from the road, but also we can find which is the maximum speed they can get. So what we've done is we've seen the data. We've now found some information that will make it more meaningful. And we've started on the journey of trying to make a visualization that's intelligible. Okay, now what we've got to do is to try and design something that will actually jump out at you and tell you things. So what we did was, effectively, we want to work out the parameters that influence the connection, because our target is defined by what the providers do, no one else. So if they choose not to do somewhere, that's in our scope, because they've chosen not to do it. And there's a number of different reasons why they might do that. Got some amazing data, Ordnance Survey, ONS, it's all available to anyone in the public sector for free. So we've got things that link the things together, the premises to the roads. The Ordnance Survey provide a lovely map, which is of road links, which is a piece of road between junctions. Well, it costs more to go across a junction. That's handy, isn't it? Okay, so we now know that's the same. That's the length of road. What's the average length of those? A couple of 100 meters, actually. Now you've got some outliers, clearly, but essentially that's the telco will actually dig for a couple of 100 meters as part of the installation. So that means, well, okay, in that case, you can take, if it's on the road link, then if it's not connected, it should be down to them. Now, persuading them it's down to them is obviously slightly different. But yes, we've got road links, and then you find that, oh, when they build an estate, they put paths inside, and actually all the roads, all the houses and flats are associated with the paths, not with the roads. So you have to add paths in as well. But that's done. Linked identifiers, So they publish in open data the link between the reference to the road link and the UPRN. So the UPRNs can be tied effectively to that. And then the other thing that has just been upgraded is the way they do built-up areas. Now, built-up areas are very handy. They just happen to have chosen, I think it's a couple of 100 meters. So you sort of walk out, imagine you're walking out of a built-up area. It ends when you have to walk more than 200 meters without meeting another house or another premise. Okay, that's very handy, actually. And then after you've done your 200 meters and you haven't met anybody, you can walk another 200 meters. And if you do meet another premise when you're walking, that becomes a subsidiary built-up area to that. So it's like a suburb, really. So all of that's recorded. And the latest thing they've done is they not only do that, but if there's a park, then actually that's in a separate shapefile. So that the things where there are no buildings are also chopped out. So your density is now so much more accurate because it's just the buildings. Right. So how can we do that? Well, we can now effectively find things like roads with mixed coverage. So here, what we've done is we've just taken the points, which are the UPRNs at the end of the sticks, like the lolly, and taken them to the road link. And we now know the distance. So we have some idea of the cost and the difficulty. And there's no good reason why those aren't done, other than it would have been a different copper route. So it's probably something that's done by BT. It's a different copper route. And when they switch that one on, then you don't get the others because they're following the route. The other advantage with the roads is that when you zoom out, it still gives you an impression of what's what. Now, if that was dots, it wouldn't really help because they'd be overwriting lots of the map fairly quickly. Because it's roads, you're just lighting up the roads. And you can do the thickness of the road as to how many UPRNs are on the road. Yeah, so you've got a very nice representation. So essentially, when it's the darker red it is, the harder it is. Green means that there aren't any there, so that's okay. We can ignore those. But then you've got the lighter orange colour is what we call expensive. So that's a bit tricky. The lighter blue they haven't been connected yet, but they should be because they're near enough. And then the dark blue is the ones that are connected. So you can see what we've done. We've effectively found something which gives us a bit more of the intelligence, but only when you're looking at it. That's not going to help you when you're trying to work out numbers and what's the cost. So now we have to try and design something which will allow us to work out the costs and how to manipulate things. So let me just run through this. So very open data, very straightforward. Essentially, we've seen the data flow. We're going to take the UPRNs, we're going to link them to the road links, and we're going to go through and find all the different things which are associated with them. Probably don't need to go through much of that. Let's go now and see what we can do with it. So this is what we're trying to work out now. So we've got the length of the road per premise. So we've got a road link and there's 10 premises on it. So say the road link's 100 meters, that's 10 meters per premise. So that's viable. So that's a useful thing to know. Some of them are very close. Some of them are 100 meters per premise, and some of them go above that. So we have a concept of a service delivery address. If you have 50 flats in a building, you don't want 50 lines going there, obviously. So a service delivery address is, okay, that's one. So it's a location which requires delivery. Then we've also got blobs on the line. So the box and whisker plot's giving you this, the range, the variability of those. And the blobs are telling you, so they're color coded, saying these are the ones that aren't connected up here. Not surprisingly, they're the ones which are a long way from the road. Now that probably tells you the type of area rather than the fact that they're a long way from the road being a problem. And then these are the ones that are connected. The surprising thing is that some of these are lower down. So it's already sort of showing us something in the way we're visualizing it. Another thing we can do is we can divide up the different lengths using a tree map. So it gives you the size relates to the number, and colour them. And now we can see, interestingly, that we got this authority over here is doing extremely well because they're managing to get fibre to some of the longest premises, some of the furthest away premises. So in other words, they're hitting the rural areas fantastically. And that compares very, well, it's very different in different areas of the country according to what their priorities are. So then we can have a hover over the things we're looking at, so the UPRNs in this case, and we can put links on there to get to things. So we can get to a Google map, because you find, why is that? That doesn't seem to be sensible. You look at it, it's a private road or a gated community, that's why. Or you get there and it's, oh, okay, that's a new build. So you start to see why. So at the early stages, we created systems where people could actually do the investigation thoroughly. And then the other thing we did was we looked at, again, setting a threshold to flip it from one side to the other and getting a feel for what the threshold was, and also the location. So you can see there, the rest of Scotland is the least connected, the one with the most individuals who don't have a decent link, and London's next. It's a bit worrying, isn't it? So London's just released a map showing the whole of the London area with how difficult places are to reach and when they don't have broadband. As a way of trying to stimulate the suppliers, which is one of the main aims that we do. So let's see if we can switch to actually look at something. Here we go. So here it is live. And so we can choose the local authority. So when we're in Cambridge, we can see the spread here, and we can see the blue is all down the low end. So, they've done a good job, but they're dealing with those areas. But lots of these areas haven't been touched. But there aren't that many of them. You can see there's not that many of them. Now, if we compare that to, say, Northumberland, that's very different. Now, the other thing we have to do is we must not disrupt the market. So that means that we have to ask every supplier, and there's about 100 of them, to give us what coverage they have and what they're planning to do to all of the 30 million premises, which we have UPRNs for. So we do that as an open market review. And then before we actually go out to do the contract, to do the tender for the contract, we do a public review, which is what the PR refers to, which you'll see elsewhere. And in the public review, this is something defined originally by Europe. You have a classification. There is more than one, so 2 or more providers in for this premise. So that's the black colour, and there aren't many black, as you can see, it's the farthest, it's the darkest colour on the right. Next one is grey, it's called, and that just means there's one provider there. And then white is the other one. So white means that there's no one who's providing it. Problem being, of course, when there's only 6% coverage, they're going to come back and they're going to say, oh, these are white, hoping that we fund them. So here, for example, we have the return of them. So this is one spec, so I've got it broken down by constituency at the moment. And you know, there's 41,890 that aren't connected. But most of them are in areas where they're very close to the road. So we could look at that in the geospatial realm. Okay. So that's the area, and you can see that you've got these places in the middle of nowhere that aren't connected. But if you remember this graph, this is one spec here. And sure enough, there's some roads there which definitely need dealing with. But you've also got all of this, which is in the towns. That's not very good value. Now, if we compare that to the Hexham, now in Hexham, we have a different picture. Go back to here. And in Hexham, we've got a lot which are difficult to reach. So 100 to 250 is where those are. So that's very challenging compared to one spec where you've got very few there, and most of the ones which are missing are down the other end. So these are just the white premises. And so some of the white premises are actually done, even though they're difficult. So they've got somebody working in that area who can do things. And sure enough, you see that the blue blob here, where it's done, is moving to the right. So actually they are working in those sorts of areas. So that's the kind of thing that we can see through making it interactive and from designing a visualization specifically to be able to allow us to be able to see. If you compare that to the other representations, well, you know, there's your table of figures. Not very effective. And about a chart? Well, again, it's missing the information that really we need, which is about the geography and how they're laid out. This is a bit better. It sort of shows you down here that these are the difficult ones. And you can see the relative scale. It also shows you that these people down here are managing to get fibre deployed in very different areas. And then I can't show you the suppliers, but if I showed you the supplier, you suddenly realise that there are specialised suppliers that are doing this. And there's one in the north, for instance, that's very effective and just in the press because everyone has to do something. Do we have any questions so far before I change?
What do you using to do this?
So that's Tableau.
Right.
And so I'm using, in Tableau, I'm using the mapping, which is from the Ordnance Survey.
Right.
So just got the Ordnance Survey. Interesting, that's actually spelled. Yeah, so we're just using the Ordnance Survey API to draw a background map. And then you can actually put it through what's the instance? Let's just stick with this. So that's giving you the background map. And then if you use Mapbox, then you can take those vector tiles from the Ordnance Survey and overlay other layers in the background map. So we can do things like the DEFRA, high areas, or other areas like special scientific interest or national parks that require additional permissions. So all of that can be hidden below, and then you can use Tableau to drop things on top.
So you've got Tableau, architecturally, you've got Tableau talking directly to Ordnance Survey.
The data.
Whatever.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
So Tableau can just use the API to go and get the map. And it can either go directly to the Ordnance Survey, or it can go to Mapbox. And then Mapbox you would set up just using a free account to load the public data in. So we only do public data that way. And on top of that, we've got Tableau with a link directly to our data store, which is in BigQuery. So then the Tableau data is very well managed. We have the data catalog, which gives you the full governance and lineage, and can flag any data errors as they occur, and change the classification of the data. So essentially, it's interesting, I can show you that as in how to set it up. It's very straightforward. I'm worried that we're losing internet, but that's. So that's that data set. But the talk is supposed to be about visualization. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, I was wondering, do you have any kind of data or evidence on decision makers, suppliers, and behaving because of the improved visualization?
Yeah, so I can give you an anecdotal one. So, as I say, I was seconded from Warwickshire, so that's Coventry, Solihull, Warwickshire. It was the broadband project. And when I first did this visualization, it showed that BT was the local provider. This is 2011, and they weren't touching the business parks because they're earning from leased lines. So it kind of makes sense. So I published the mapping, which showed where people were going. And in those days, Virgin were saying, yeah, that's fine. So I actually put the speed on the house. If you zoomed in far enough, you'd see the speed on the house, and you know, whether it was Virgin or not. BT wouldn't allow you to put the thing on, but I just got permission from Virgin. So is that Virgin? No. Oh, well, I can guess who it is then. So so then effectively that meant that a company saw that and set up. So it was called WarwickNet in the early days. I forgot what it's called now. It's changed its name. But and they just went to the business parks. So they basically used the passive infrastructure, which is the ducts and poles, and they would get permission to access the cabinet. They put their own cabinet next to it, and they'd feed the business parks. And it just wiped out the coverage for the business parks from BT as they moved across. So I wasn't the favourite person, yeah.
Does the impact then with direct to exchange houses, like new builds, direct to exchange, there's no cabinet on?
Right, so once it's fibre, there's no issue. The problem you have is that in the telephone exchange, you now have multiple people's equipment because they effectively opened up the last link. Then you're not then allowed to put equipment in the exchange that does the VDSL, which is what you do to deliver high speed. So you can't deliver it anyway, even if it's close to the exchange. And that's because that might interfere with other people's equipment. So they just disallowed that. So what they have to do is they have to effectively implement a cabinet part way when they were doing superfast. So they had the choice where effectively we had one place in Hampton on Arden where mostly was connected to the exchange because the exchange was right in the middle of the village. And so they had to just put, I think it was 4 or 5 cabinets in to enable them to deliver that as VDSL, which was the superfast. Yeah.
What were all cable internet sync doing?
So
how was that? This market.
Right, so just run through what technology you're talking about.
Talking about the route segment, it works out in the cable.
Okay, yeah, so you can get the wireless, that's fine, but there are differences with what you can do with that. So if you've got fibre, you know, they've even got quantum effects just using fibre, for example. So it's like it's not future proof, but you can go a lot further with it. So you can have a light path, and then you can use that light path for anything. So that's why there's a big focus on fibre. Now, Virgin obviously isn't fibre, but it's still gigabit, and that was allowed because the key thing is to get the gigabit connectivity up, because that's where we are now. So that's just being realistic. So in terms of the impact on the wireless, well, there are areas. What we're going to look at next is the output area classifications. There are areas where people live and they're transient populations. There might be students, but they're not really going to want to pay for a landline. It's also certain demographics don't have landlines, they just have mobiles. So trying to persuade the providers to put fibre into those is like, why? You know, none of them have any landlines, so they're not going to pay for a fibre connection. So yeah, there's an interaction between the two. But at the moment, the current policy is to try and push as far as possible to get fibre there, just because it's, you know, should have been done years ago, really. So is there anything else? So output area classifications. It's a ONS thing. And if you've come across it before, basically it classifies the different output areas, so sensors areas, in terms of the type of population there. And it's very, very detailed and very extensive. So they've done some lovely visualizations themselves where you can zoom down and you can see, for whatever parameter you choose, what it's like in that area. So in 2011, now again, really old visualizations now, I looked at this in 2011 and created things like this, where essentially you have, I think it's 60 different parameters that they've got. So there's like loads and loads of data, really hard. And they're set up so that it's above or below, you know, what's normally done. So effectively then for each variable, this shows you whether it's above or below. My colour's probably back to front, never mind. The particular value. And then so there's things like percentage of people who live in a semi-detached house. So when you're looking at a particular area, or even you know, a particular, yeah, it's all this output area level, so it always is an area, then you can see what kind of housing there is there. You can also see different things. So this is so the other parameter that they use is you know, so you've got flats, whether it's community housing, and whether it's rented. So there's all sorts of things just in terms of housing. So effectively, let's just go here. So you've got from one of those, you can hover, and essentially you've got a series of menu items which you can choose, and that will take you straight to an aerial photo, or the data shine is the things that they were doing with their visualizations. So that's what it is. So essentially it allows you to handle what is a ridiculously difficult to manage data set quite effectively. So I got the idea from some work that we did in Warwickshire, where we're looking to place a library. And so we're trying to assess the demographic groups that need to get to the library. And we're using Mosaic, which is like a commercial that you have to pay for. The OAC is free. Then we can look at it in terms of, you know, the particular is, I've forgotten actually what this is now. It's the type of, yeah, it's the customer type. So you've got location and customer type, I think it is. I should have known my data, but it's a long time ago, sorry. Yeah, so that's the need, and this is the custom group. So we're looking to work out where to place the library. That's basically what we're doing. So that's where I got the idea from. That's not my work. And so what we did was build a visualization which uses all of this data. Now you have pen portraits of the different groups that are written. And then they have a color scheme, which I've just replicated in Tableau, which is published. And this then gives you the hierarchy for what those things are. So there's like 3 levels. So I've done 2 in words and 1 as a character code where you have to hover over it to see it. And this is national, so you can handle a whole national data set in Tableau, and you can look at it in various ways. So let's see how that works in practice, because we've already established that what we want to do. So that's the visualization that the ONS did, and I think actually might be, yeah. So this is the Tableau visualization. I put it all on one dashboard, which is not such a good idea, but then you've got the, you can hover over an area, and you can then from here you can jump to an aerial view. I've done Bing and Google just to be fair. Then there's some statistics about the output area, which is it's interesting. Why would it not draw it? Okay. Yeah. So then you've got these data shines, which is where they're lighting up the different census information. And although I did this in 2011, you can go and see the data shine, which is now. And it just jumps into that location and shows you their particular subgroup. And as you hover over them, you can see what these things mean. So lots and lots of different ways of visualizing. I won't make judgment about their colour, but I've used the colours they published on this. So what you can do then is you can have this kind of representation, which is the 60 variables. And then if I choose, say, this area, it's going to show me the characteristics of the 60 variables for that one area. So with that highlighted, I can now hover over these and see what that is. So that's households who live in a detached or bungalow. And then from there, I could go and see the data shine of it as well. So whereas this one down here is, this demographic is the number of people per hectare is very low. So it's a rural area, so you can tell because it's a large area. Large. So if we then have a look in something in the middle, say, something like this, then that one is, so that's the households with full-time students. So we've landed on students. So we could also see, if we wanted to, we could then see, let's just take out there. I could instead choose to look at for example, these are different. So students around campus. Again, those are the students around campus. Yeah. And you've got more than one subgroup within that. So they're showing the differences here. So these ones are the ones who are living in a communal establishment. And these ones are households with full-time students. Yeah. So you get a feel for that massive data set because you can interact with it. Yeah. And that's the key. So that's what I've tried to illustrate. And then over here, you've got the pen portraits, which essentially give you the detail about what those are, what those particular groups are. And you can get more information about that, again, by clicking and going to read the full definition. So what I've tried to show is that there are steps in designing a visualization. And we essentially you can see the data initially, but you need to identify what parts are going to take that data and make it more meaningful. And then we need to think about something which is going to use the ink available and the space available effectively to make it intelligible. And then the learning to paint is using a tool like Tableau rather than something that just has a set of charts that you can choose from. So you could do a Sankey chart, or you could do a graph, bar chart or whatever. But the thing here is that you're literally painting with numbers with Tableau, so it's just limited by your imagination. And the whole focus is the thing that you have to be looking at all the time is you're trying to empower people to make the insights necessary to solve the problems. So, how do you cope with my so I haven't really talked about the AI very much. I've got some stuff on the AI as well, but I've got focused on that. So that's my team. Thank you very much. That's basically.
Thank you, Chris. Such a innovative things we have seen here. Possibly, if we look back in our school days, the earliest graphs and charts we used to do histograms. Now things have gone so far, so sophisticated. Now the analytics and visualization has become a discipline in its own right. We are just not getting the data how to present it. We are making decisions upon it. We are reducing awfully complex data sets of 60-odd parameters by reducing dimensions to make it comprehensible. So those are the things that came. And also, of course, the technology behind it also is helpful because they have also evolved since Excel bar graph and pie chart to as sophisticated as Tableau. And there are similar tools as well, like this one, many in the industry. So really, really appreciated and really informative. And with that, thank you, Chris.